You're not a fool, you're a coward." Mark Weston delivered those words with the frigidity of an ice floe, staring into the tearful eyes of Isabel "Izzy" Royce, the woman who had just confessed she was pregnant. "That is not my child. I am not stupid," he decreed, turning away and erasing a future he refused to be a part of. He thought he had won, had maintained control. But a year later, in a sunny Boston park, life would deal the most devastating blow to his iron logic. He saw her sitting under a blooming cherry tree, cradling not one, but 3 identical infants. 3 pairs of striking blue eyes that were an exact mirror of his own. Prepare yourself for a story of arrogance, redemption, and the undeniable truth of love. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. The arrogance of the man in control. The beginning. Mark Weston had always lived his life by numbers, logic, and absolute control. Every part of his existence was constructed around precision: his tailored suits, his minimalist office, his incalculably successful investment firm, and his inflexible expectations for others. He was a man who didn't believe in emotion because emotion was unpredictable, and unpredictability, in his eyes, was an unforgivable weakness. The glass walls of his penthouse office high above Manhattan reflected his success, shining like armor. To all who worked under him, he was the definition of composure, a man who couldn't be moved by anything, not even love. That is what he told himself when Izzy walked out of his life a year earlier, tears in her eyes and a truth trembling on her lips. She had told him she was pregnant, her voice wavering not from fear, but from the hope of a future together. Mark had looked at her with the same distant expression he used in boardroom meetings, and had snapped, "I am not a fool. That is not my child." The words fell from his mouth with such cold finality that even he felt their echo. But he didn't retract them. He watched her turn, her shoulders squared, though he knew she was breaking inside. He didn't run after her, didn't call her, and didn't allow himself to doubt his own conviction. He buried himself in work, signing multi-million-dollar deals, giving interviews, and expanding his empire. If a thought of her slipped through, he drowned it in another project or another late-night scotch. Months passed like this, and soon Izzy was nothing more than a faint memory, something that once shone brightly but was extinguished by his pride. Still, somewhere deep down, there was a void that nothing filled. He refused to name it, because that would mean admitting he had lost something real. He told himself he wasn't made for family, that relationships were a distraction, and that she had been just another chapter. Yet despite all his victories, he sometimes found himself staring at the city lights from his penthouse, wondering why he felt so profoundly alone. The unexpected encounter and the scorching doubt. Mark never expected to see her again. He thought life took care of keeping the past properly buried. It was an unusually warm spring afternoon in Boston, after months of winter, when he drove to the Boston Public Garden for a private meeting with investors. He got out of his car, phone in hand, already halfway focused on his call, when he saw her. At first, he didn't recognize her. She looked different, softer somehow, her hair lighter, her posture more delicate but, at the same time, stronger. She was sitting on a wooden bench under a blooming cherry tree. In her arms lay not one, but 3 babies. 3 small infants, wrapped in light blankets, each with the same small nose, the same round face, and the same bright blue eyes he saw in his own mirror every morning. Mark froze, his phone slipping from his fingers, his heart pounding so loud it drowned out the sounds of the park. Izzy looked up, and their eyes met. The moment stretched between them, thick with tension, and everything left unsaid. There was no anger on her face, no accusation, only a calm acceptance, as if she had already made peace with his absence. Her expression told him he was no longer a part of her world, and that realization hit him with a force for which he was unprepared. He began to walk toward her, unsure what he would say, whether to apologize or explain. But when he was close enough to speak, she stood up. Her movements were firm, the way people who have resolved not to look back move. Her gaze met his, clear and unwavering, and she said in a low voice, "Don't come closer. You're not a fool, remember?" Then she turned and walked away, gently pushing the stroller, the 3 tiny heads barely visible over the blankets. He stood there, unable to move, watching her figure grow smaller. The weight of his own arrogance settled heavily on his chest, pressing the part of him that still believed he was right. But as he watched her disappear into the sunlight, a thought crept into his mind, quiet and undeniable. What if he had been wrong all along? He didn't go to his meeting that day. He sat on that very bench for hours, staring at the spot where she had been, his thoughts unraveling. For the first time in his life, Mark Weston could not control the situation. The power, the money, the status, none of it mattered. All that resonated in his mind were her words and the image of 3 identical faces, each bearing a piece of him he had refused to acknowledge. Moment of reflection. Mark acted out of pride and fear. What would you do in Mark's place right now? Would you fight for your family or accept her rejection as deserved punishment? Let us know your opinion in the comments. The beginning of redemption. Listen, instead of fix, Mark spent the next few weeks tormented by the image of Izzy and the 3 babies. The blue eyes of those infants followed him everywhere. He realized with sickening clarity that it hadn't been logic that guided him when he rejected her. It had been fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of love, fear of losing control. One afternoon, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Mark drove back to the park. After almost an hour, just as he was about to leave, he saw her again. She was walking slowly, pushing a double stroller, with one of the children in her arms. Mark got out of the car, his pulse racing. She noticed him and stopped, tense. "Izzy," he said softly, the name feeling strange on his tongue. "Please, I just want to talk." "About what?" she replied, cold. "About how you called me a liar? About how you decided you weren't a fool and walked out on your own children?" "I was wrong," he said, his voice slightly broken. "I didn't believe you, and I can't take that back. But please, let me fix this." She let out a bitter laugh. "Fix it? You can't fix what you broke, Mark. You can't show up a year later and decide you care just because you saw their faces." She turned to walk away. "Please," he said softly, his hand extended. "Let me at least help. Whatever you need." She stopped, not turning around. "Help? Do you think money can help? What I needed was for you to believe in me when it mattered, and you didn't." With that, she walked away. Mark stood there, drenched by the light rain that began to fall, realizing he couldn't simply buy his way back into their lives. Control had destroyed everything. Mark decided he wouldn't give up. He started going to the park, keeping his distance, just to make sure Izzy and the children were okay. One day, he dared to approach her modest house when he saw her struggling to carry grocery bags. "I'm not here to argue," he said softly, picking up a bag that had fallen. "Just let me help." After a long silence, she nodded. "If you really want to help, then listen. Don't talk. Don't try to fix. Just listen." Mark nodded, humbled by how little she asked. Inside, the small living room was filled with toys. She named the children. Their names are Noah, Aiden, and Leo. Seeing them up close, his heart tightened. When one of them, Noah, grabbed his finger and laughed, Mark felt something inside him break. The hours passed, and Mark, clumsily, played with them. When Izzy sat down next to him, she said, "You don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything." He looked directly at her. "I know," he said, "but I owe them everything." Constancy and humility, Marco's lesson. Days turned into weeks. Mark began to appear in Izzy's life not as an intruder, but as a quiet presence. He fixed the broken porch step, installed a new light fixture, always without asking for thanks. Patience became his new currency. He surprised himself reading manuals on how to swaddle a baby or warm a bottle. One morning, Izzy found him on the floor of her garage, struggling to install car seats. She crossed her arms, trying not to laugh. "There's a manual for that," she said. He looked up, smiling awkwardly, his face smeared with grease. "I was never good with manuals," he admitted. For the first time, she smiled at him with genuine amusement. "You're putting it in backwards," she said, kneeling beside him. The brief contact of their hands sent a warmth through Mark that he hadn't felt in years. He started spending more time with the boys, letting them crawl over him and pull his hair. He didn't flinch when they spilled milk on an expensive suit. He was content simply to be there, anchored. One night, when the children were asleep, Izzy found him in the living room, his head against the wall, exhausted, but at peace. She confided that she had to run an errand. It was the first time she had entrusted the children to him alone. When she returned, she found all three asleep on his chest. Give this video a like if you think Mark is earning his stripes as a good father. Seeing her, he straightened up. "They wore me out," he said with a tired smile. "You did well," she finally said, words that struck him deeply. He knew it wasn't forgiveness, but it was recognition that he was trying. The storm and the inescapable truth, the climax. On a chilly January evening, a snowstorm hit the city, and Izzy's house lost power. Just as panic began to set in, Mark appeared at the door, his hair covered in snow. "You didn't think I'd let you freeze alone, did you?" he said, stepping in with lanterns, blankets, and hot food. They ate by candlelight. Once the children were asleep, sitting together, Izzy asked him, "Why are you doing this, Mark?" "Really?" "Because I want to," he said simply. "Because I should have been here all along." "No," she insisted, trembling slightly. "You could have walked away. Why come back to this?" He looked at her, his blue eyes firm and full of conviction. "Because this is the only thing that has ever felt real. I've had everything else, money, success, control, but none of it meant anything. You and the boys are the only things that make me want to be a better man." "You hurt me," she whispered. "You broke something in me that took years to repair." "I know," he said, his voice sure. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving I can be the man who puts it back together, even if you never love me again." That night, when he put his jacket over her shoulders as she dozed, Izzy's fear receded. She realized she was no longer facing the man who had abandoned her, but the man who had chosen to stay, who had weathered the storm and remained. The new contract of love, the resolution. Spring returned, and love slowly and cautiously resurfaced. Mark was no longer just a helper. He was a present father. One day, Izzy finally dropped her last barrier, whispering that she liked the man he had become. The decisive moment came in the public garden, the same place as their initial confrontation. Mark took her back there. "I used to hate you for that day," Izzy told him, "for doubting me, for doubting them." "You had every right," Mark solemnly agreed. "I don't hate you anymore," she admitted. "I just needed time to believe this was real." "It is real," Mark said, a lump forming in his throat. You and the boys are my life now." Izzy took his hand. "I know." That same evening, Mark, with trembling hands, presented her with a folder. Inside were the legal documents for adoption and paternity recognition, guaranteeing her and the children absolute security. Then, he pulled out a small box. It didn't contain a single engagement ring, but 4. "This is for you, Izzy," he said, sliding a sober diamond ring onto her finger. "It's my promise of love. And these 3 small ones." He pointed to 3 simple bands, engraved with the names Noah, Aiden, and Leo. "They are my promise to them, that no matter what happens, I will never doubt their place in my life again." Izzy smiled through her tears. "Yes, Mark. Yes, I accept." They were married shortly after, in a simple ceremony, full of the laughter of 3 little boys who destroyed the cake. Mark, the man of control, had finally found true happiness in the beautiful, unpredictable chaos of his family. The significant ending. The legacy. Mark became a passionate advocate for single mothers. He sold his cold penthouse and established the Triplets Foundation in Boston, using his wealth and expertise to protect the very families he had once attempted to destroy. Mark Weston used to be the definition of a successful man. Now, he was the definition of a redeemed man. The final lesson. "I thought strength was in control," Mark would often say in his speeches. "But I was wrong. True strength is in the humility to admit your mistakes, the patience to rebuild what you broke, and the courage to stay when everyone expects you to run away. I lost my way when I said, 'I'm not a fool,' but I found everything when I had the courage to say, 'I was wrong, and I'm going to be the father I should have been from the start.'" Izzy and Mark had forged a love stronger than the original, a connection born not of perfect romance, but of hard-won, humble and enduring redemption. Comment. Here. What has Mark's story taught you about redemption and the true meaning of fatherhood? We want to read your opinion. Would you like me to develop the future of the triplets further? Or do you have a completely new story you'd like me to adapt? Welcome back to the beautiful chaos of the Weston family. If you believe Izzy deserves her own spotlight, hit that like button. And tell us, what piece of art do you think holds the key to Izzy's future? The Wife's Second Act. 5 years after their humble wedding, life for Mark and Izzy Weston was a testament to the power of second chances. Mark's Triplets Foundation was a leading national nonprofit, and his former life as a ruthless corporate titan was a distant memory. His greatest joy was packing 3 identical lunchboxes for Noah, Aiden, and Leo every morning. However, Izzy, having poured her heart into raising their sons and supporting the foundation, began to feel a familiar tug, the ambition she had shelved 15 years ago. She had a degree in art history, a passion she had sacrificed for Mark's career and then for her family. Mark, the redeemed man, became Izzy's fiercest champion. He insisted she pursue her dreams. With the boys now in school, Izzy enrolled in a specialized postgraduate program at a renowned Boston university, focusing on 19th century European art restoration. Izzy quickly excelled. Her analytical mind, honed by years of managing the chaos of triplets, was perfectly suited for the meticulous world of curatorial research. She landed a prestigious fellowship at the Museum of Fine Arts, MFA, working on a major exhibition that could launch her career. The Ghost of Ambition. Izzy's breakthrough project was the authentication of a rumored lost Monet sketch. If authenticated, it would be the centerpiece of the MFA's Spring Gala. Izzy was teamed up with a senior research associate who, she soon discovered, was utterly cold, driven, and treated the curatorial world like a brutal financial market. His name was Gregory Vance. During a tense project meeting, Gregory dismissed Izzy's research on the provenance of the Monet sketch. "Your data is sound, Royce," he said, using her maiden name with deliberate coldness. "But your interpretation is sentimental. Art isn't about feelings. It's about market value and irrefutable facts. Izzy was immediately thrown back to her past. The arrogance, the condescension, the absolute dismissal of anything deemed emotional. She realized Gregory was a mirror image of the old Mark. Later that week, Izzy overheard a hushed conversation between Gregory and a museum director. "I need that promotion, Peter," Gregory said sharply. "And I need that fellowship lead, not that stay-at-home mom. She's got the talent, but she lacks the killer instinct." Izzy realized that Gregory didn't just see her as competition. He saw her as dead weight. Precisely the term Mark had used to describe her years ago. She was facing the return of the same toxic ambition that had once destroyed her life. If you were Izzy, would you confront Gregory directly and risk jeopardizing the fellowship? Or would you quietly out-research him and win through pure merit? Vote with a comment. The family defends. The pressure intensified. Gregory subtly sabotaged Izzy's access to key documents and undermined her findings in internal reports. Izzy was furious, but focused. She wouldn't let him push her out of her second act. Mark noticed her stress immediately. He was no longer the man who dismissed emotion. He was the man who had learned humility. One night, Izzy recounted the situation, her voice trembling with frustration. "He's just like you were, Mark. He thinks he can control the outcome by eliminating the unpredictable element." "Me." Mark's jaw tightened. "Then we fight him with the only thing he doesn't understand, integrity and overwhelming presence." Mark, the former corporate shark, took a week off from the foundation. He didn't use his wealth or connections to threaten Gregory. Instead, he used his analytical expertise. He helped Izzy organize her massive data sets, building an airtight, irrefutable digital case for the Monet sketch's authentication. Not just based on feeling, but on undeniable, cross-referenced historical fact. He took over the household completely, ensuring Izzy had peace. Noah, Aiden, and Leo, who were fully aware of their dad's big mistake and his redemption, were his proud little army. They'd bring Izzy snacks and demand that Gregory leave their mommy's office alone when he called. "Dad said you're too important to be bothered," Leo declared into the phone one afternoon. The final confrontation came during the fellowship board review. Gregory presented his theory, which conveniently ignored Izzy's most crucial findings. When it was Izzy's turn, she didn't attack Gregory. She presented her research, backed by Mark's meticulous data organization, a presentation so thorough, so visually stunning, and so analytically solid that it silenced the room. She presented a new, crucial piece of evidence, a letter from Monet's patron that Gregory had dismissed, that irrefutably authenticated the sketch. The board members, highly respected academics, were stunned by the depth of her research. The chairman paused. "Ms. Weston, this is beyond impressive. Your methodology is flawless." Izzy looked at Gregory, who was sweating and defeated. She smiled, not with arrogance, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had won through pure merit and truth. The ultimate victory. The result was immediate. Izzy Weston was awarded the prestigious Lead Fellowship. Gregory Vance was quietly sidelined. The final victory, however, wasn't the promotion. It came later that week. Izzy and Mark were back in the Boston Public Garden, the scene of their devastating confrontation years ago. They were watching their boys run and laugh under the cherry trees. "I won, Mark," Izzy whispered, leaning against him. "I won, and I didn't have to become him to do it." Mark kissed her forehead. "You never had to win, Izzy. You just had to choose to stop being silent. I'm so proud of the curator you are, and the woman you chose to be, despite the stupid coward I was." Izzy squeezed his hand. "The true victory isn't the title, Mark. It's knowing that the man who once called me dead weight is now the anchor who helped me sail." Their story became a quiet legacy of truth, that the strongest partnerships are forged not in shared perfection, but in shared humility and the courage to fight the old demons with a brand new, ethical game plan. What an amazing comeback for Izzy. Her redemption is complete. What title do you think Izzy will ultimately earn? Museum director or professor? Will Mark and Izzy ever go on a quiet vacation without their little army of 3? Thank you for following this incredible journey. Leave your final thoughts and subscribe to Narratives and Memories for our next unforgettable story, The 3 Paths and the Global Bridge. Welcome back to the Weston family legacy. If you believe in embracing the chaos of growing up, hit that like button and tell us which triplet's future path excites you the most. The triplets' separate worlds. Years passed, and Noah, Aiden, and Leo were no longer just a formidable little army, but distinct, formidable young men of 14. Their identical blue eyes, once the source of Mark's shock, now reflected 3 completely separate worlds, each testing the foundations of his and Izzy's hard-won peace. Noah, the architect, the most serious and quiet. He inherited Mark's old analytical mind, but tempered it with Izzy's artistic precision. He spent hours building intricate models of cities, valuing structure, logic, and control, the very traits a Mark had to unlearn. Aiden, the activist, the most passionate and empathetic. He inherited Izzy's fire for justice. Aiden saw the world's inequalities clearly, spending his time volunteering at the Triplets Foundation, often challenging Mark and Izzy on why they couldn't fix everything faster. Leo, the connector, the most charming and spontaneous. He was the diplomat, the bridge between his 2 intense brothers, excelling in sports and social situations. He had an easy warmth that reminded Izzy of the best version of Mark, before the ambition consumed him. Mark, the man who once believed in absolute predictability, now found his greatest daily challenge was navigating the unpredictable emotional weather of his 3 teenage sons. He and Izzy, the former curator, had to use every bit of humility and research to guide them. The challenge of the global legacy. Izzy, now a respected curator and professor, received an invitation that thrilled her professionally, but shook their family stability. A 3-year position leading a major restoration and cultural exchange project in Rome. It was a dream opportunity that would cement her legacy in the art world. Simultaneously, the Triplets Foundation received a massive, transformative grant, but with the condition that they rapidly expand their mentorship program into Europe, starting with a hub in Rome to address the rising needs of single-parent families there. The coincidence was undeniable, a clear sign that their professional paths were once again intertwined. Mark and Izzy found themselves in a familiar yet new dilemma. Their future required them to uproot their family. The boys reacted precisely according to their personalities. Noah calculated the pros and cons, excellent schools, historical architecture. He was in. Aiden saw a new mission field, direct support for European mothers. He was in. Leo worried about leaving his soccer team and friends. He was firmly out. The family's harmony was briefly shattered by Leo's distress. Mark, remembering his own cold detachment years ago, refused to make a business decision that ignored his son's heart. What should Mark and Izzy prioritize? The once-in-a-lifetime career and legacy expansion in Rome, or the emotional stability of their 3 sons in Boston? Tell us your opinion in the comments. The Triplets Solution. Mark and Izzy spent a tense week debating. Mark was ready to turn down the foundation grant, and Izzy was prepared to decline the professorship. They wouldn't sacrifice their hard-won family unity for ambition again. It was Leo, the spontaneous connector, who provided the unexpected solution. "Wait," Leo said during a somber family dinner. "I don't want to go to Rome because of my friends. But you guys need to go. Dad needs to help those moms, and Mom needs to save those paintings. Why can't I just stay here with Grandma and visit on holidays?" The proposal, coming from the most social and dependent of the three, was astonishing. Aiden, the activist, immediately chimed in. "No, we have to go as a family. But Mom, why don't we turn this into a research project? We can document the difference the foundation makes from the ground up, and I can send updates back to my class." Noah, the architect, nodded. "And I can use the Roman Forum as a three-dimensional modeling project. We can commute home for the big holidays, Dad." The triplets, in their own unique way, had proposed a hybrid, compromise solution, a blend of control, passion, and connectivity that Mark and Izzy, blinded by their parental fears, had missed entirely. Mark looked at Izzy, his eyes shining with pride and humility. "They are stronger than we ever were, Izzy. They don't see a choice between two sides. They build a bridge." The legacy continues. Mark, Izzy, Aiden, and Noah moved to a sunlit apartment in Rome. Leo stayed behind in Boston with Izzy's mother, thriving in his routine, with frequent chaotic video calls and holiday visits. The family, spread across an ocean, found a deeper connection, forged by purpose and trust. Izzy immersed herself in the Roman ruins, her art history legacy secured. Mark launched the European Triplets Initiative, applying his compassion on a global scale. The final lesson from Mark and Izzy was that they no longer needed to control their family's life, but to trust the resilience they had instilled. They had given their sons the courage to be themselves, and in return, their sons gave them the courage to pursue their greatest dreams. The story of Mark and Izzy Weston is the ultimate testament that the most valuable legacy isn't the wealth you create, but the autonomous, compassionate, and brave humans you raise. What an incredible family. The Weston legacy is truly unstoppable. Do you think Leo will eventually join the family in Rome, or will he prefer the stability of Boston? What should the family's next big adventure be? Thank you for following this incredible journey. Leave your final thoughts and subscribe to Narratives and Memories for our next unforgettable story. The Roman Rhythms and the Test of Patience. Welcome back to the Weston family saga. If you've ever moved to a new country and struggled with the change, hit that like button. And tell us, what Italian challenge do you think Mark is struggling with the most? The language, the bureaucracy, or the slow pace of life? The American verte, the Italian pace. The Westons' first year in Rome was a whirlwind of breathtaking beauty and frustrating bureaucracy. They lived in a spacious, sun-drenched apartment overlooking the Pantheon, a view that constantly reminded Izzy of the value of permanence. Izzy thrived in her role, the ancient city fueling her curatorial passion. She easily adapted to the slower, more deliberate Italian pace, finding beauty in the dolce vita, the sweet life. Mark, however, found his patience tested daily. The European Triplets Initiative required navigating a maze of governmental approvals, regional partners, and a profound lack of the New York urgency he was accustomed to. Meetings often started late, decisions took weeks, and the concept of a hard deadline seemed to be merely a suggestion. "I can't operate like this, Izzy," Mark vented one evening, pacing their Roman living room. "The Italian team running the mentorship rollout is wonderful, but they keep pushing back the launch date. In New York, I'd have fired 3 people and had the platform live by now." "This isn't New York, my love," Izzy reminded him gently, sipping her wine. "This is Rome. Here, the ruins remind you that rushing won't change history. You can't control efficiency here. You have to cultivate trust. You're trying to control the outcome with force, but you need to lead with patience." Mark sighed, the stress visible on his face. He was still fighting the ghost of his former self, the man who believed speed and pressure were the only paths to success. The fund's ethical compromise, the real test, came with the foundation's biggest challenge yet: securing a partnership with a major European bank. The bank offered a massive, game-changing grant, but with a condition that went against the foundation's core ethics. The bank insisted on using a rigid, profit-driven algorithm to select the single mothers for the microloan program, prioritizing those with the lowest risk credit scores, thereby excluding the most vulnerable women who needed help the most. Mark, seeing the potential to triple the fund's reach, was tempted to compromise. "Izzy, if we take this, Gia, we can help more people. Even if the first round isn't the most in need, we can scale faster, and then we can fight the algorithm later." Izzy was appalled. "No, Mark. The entire foundation was built because you finally understood that worth is not measured by risk or profit. You are willing to betray the very women you sought to protect because you see a big number." That's the old Mark talking, the one who didn't care about the one person in need. Their argument was tense and painful, a harsh echo of their past. But this time, the roles were reversed. Izzy, the one who was once deemed emotional, was holding the ethical line, while Mark, the man of redemption, was struggling with the complexity of doing good on a global scale. What should Mark and Izzy do with the bank's offer? A. Take the money and accept the flawed algorithm for a year. Scale first. Or B. Reject the money and prioritize the core mission. Integrity first. Comment with A or B. The lesson from home. The deadlock was broken by an unexpected source. A video call from Leo in Boston. Leo, during the call, casually mentioned a drama at school where a new, shy student was excluded from a group project because he wasn't smart enough. Leo, the connector, convinced the teacher to let the boy join, arguing that the project needed different skills, not just the best grades. The anecdote hit Mark like a thunderbolt. He realized the bank's algorithm was the same cold, exclusionary logic of his past, excluding people because they didn't meet a predefined and narrow metric of worthiness. Mark looked at Izzy, his eyes humbled. "You were right. The core mission is non-negotiable. I was trying to manage the foundation like a corporation again. The integrity is the scalability." They jointly rejected the bank's offer. Instead, Mark used his technical skills and a smaller ethical grant to develop his own new algorithm for the foundation, one that prioritized resilience and necessity over credit risk. The rhythm of Rome. The next morning, Mark didn't rush his coffee. He didn't check his phone during breakfast. He walked with Izzy to the forum, not for a business meeting, but simply to look at the ruins. The Romans knew something about building a legacy, didn't they? Mark mused, looking at the enduring columns. They built slowly, with purpose, and they built to last. Izzy smiled, taking his hand. Our legacy isn't the bank account, Mark. It's the integrity we live by. It's the example we set for Noah, Aiden, and Leo, wherever they are. Mark had finally learned the Roman rhythm. Slow, deliberate, and built on an unshakable foundation of conviction. His journey was no longer about controlling the world, but about controlling his response to the world, ensuring that every decision, no matter the scale, honored the promise he made in that tiny house years ago. The Weston family proved that the greatest success is finding the patience to build a legacy of purpose, one ethical decision at a time, allowing love and integrity to set the final pace. The legacy of 3 sons. 3 years after the ethical stand against the European bank, the Weston family's time in Rome concluded. It was a period of profound growth, not in wealth, but in character. The European Triplets Initiative was a resounding success, proving that resilience and necessity were indeed the best metrics for investment. Izzy's work culminated in a globally recognized exhibition, securing her place among the world's elite curators. But the greatest development was the maturity of her sons. Noah, the architect. Having meticulously studied Roman structures, Noah declared his future was in sustainable urban planning, determined to build cities with integrity, not just profit. He learned from his father's past mistakes, focusing on the foundation's long-term health over quick gains. Aiden, the activist. Immersed in the reality of the foundation's work, Aiden focused his passion on human rights law, seeing the need to fight systemic inequalities. He learned from his mother's fight against the academic establishment, prioritizing justice over complacency. Leo, the connector. The most surprising transformation. Leo, having navigated a long-distance family life with grace, discovered his talent for psychology and conflict resolution. He became the family's unofficial counselor, applying his innate empathy to help mediate foundation conflicts. The family returned to Boston, their house now echoing with the deep voices and complex debates of three young men. Mark and Izzy found that the years of humility and patience had fully equipped them for parenthood in this new phase. They had learned to guide, not control. The final balance. Mark officially retired from the day-to-day operations of the Triplets Foundation, transitioning to the role of chief mentor and strategist. He sold his remaining stocks in the old corporate world, channeling the funds into a perpetual endowment for the foundation. His professional life had finally achieved the simple, profound harmony he once scoffed at. His greatest daily routine was no longer the boardroom, but the evening conversation with Izzy, a quiet ritual where they reviewed their day, sharing their small victories and challenges. One evening, Izzy was preparing to travel to New York to accept an honorary doctorate. Mark stood in their living room, watching the snow fall outside, a deep sense of contentment settling over him. Izzy walked over, dressed in a sharp, elegant suit, ready for her flight. "I'm leaving you with the Three Musketeers, their 3 very complex homework assignments, and a fully stocked fridge. Can the former corporate titan handle the domestic chaos?" Mark smiled, a genuine, humble smile that had replaced the arrogant smirk of his past. He took her hands. "I used to think my power was in managing a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, Izzy," he said. "Now, I know my true strength lies in knowing how to build a fire, mediate a debate between 2 future lawyers, and make sure the dishwasher is loaded correctly." He paused, his blue eyes warm with love. "Go, my love. Go claim the honor you earned. We, your boys and I, are your unshakable foundation. We are anchored in the truth you fought for." The lasting impression. The family's story culminated years later when the Triplets Foundation was permanently endowed, its future secured, and its global reach undeniable. Mark and Izzy, now elder statesmen of purpose-driven success, often gave joint lectures. Their most famous principle was known simply as the Triplet Principle. True strength is found in 3 parts: the humility to admit your mistake, the patience to rebuild what you broke, and the courage to stay when everyone expects you to run away. Mark Weston, the man who once said, "I am not stupid," had finally learned that the true measure of intelligence is not in knowing all the facts, but in knowing the value of what you truly cannot live without. His redemption was complete, sealed not by a legal contract, but by the unwavering love and respect of his family. The story of Mark and Izzy Weston is the ultimate testament that the greatest legacy is not built by avoiding the chaos of life, but by embracing it with integrity and unconditional love. Thank you for following the incredible journey of Mark and Izzy Weston. Their story of redemption and purpose is truly complete.